Hello and welcome back to Argyle Digital CMO Virtual. My name is Michael with Argyle. Thank you so much for joining us today. A couple of notes before I turn things over to our speaker. First, a quick reminder to stop by our sponsor's virtual booth at any time during today's event and for the following week. Sponsor booths are accessible from the main agenda page for this event. To ask questions throughout the session, simply click into the Q&A chat and we'll address your questions at the end of the session. Now, without further ado, I'm so happy to introduce Paul Price, Argyle CEO and Chief Strategy Officer. Title, Event Marketing, Defining Strategy and Strengthening Relationships. Paul, we're so happy to have you. Welcome.
Thanks, Michael, again. Hi, everyone. As one of the leaders in the event marketing business, and given the importance of event marketing strategically to many of you, we thought it would be of interest to go under the hood, so to speak, with you today and share with you some of the numbers that we don't typically share, but we think in the interests of helping understand just what was the impact in the event marketing industry with us as a if you like, a sample by way of what we learned as a result of switching our event calendar to digital. And then as a result of our advisory team's efforts, we do want to share with you some of the highlights of a very, very recent survey we conducted amongst our client base, examining their outlook for 21 and the remainder and earlier into 2022. And that said, I'd like to finish off with giving you a few of my takeaways, at least, and perhaps some thoughts about actions that you may well be able to take as a result of what you learned today. The chat room is open for questions at any stage, and I'll be glad to address them at the end of the presentation. By way of context, we switched all of our live events to digital in March of last year. We conducted, as a result, 155 events. The calendar was somewhat trimmed down, but not by much. The multiple formats involving multi-day conferences, 4.5-day events, small one-to-one, one-to-few engagements, and no real change at all to our webinar business, which has been on a very steady growth path in the course of the last few years, and we ran just a bit over 200 webinars last year. So one of the most interesting outcomes for us as a result, again, as a snapshot of our industry, is that attendance grew, and it grew quite significantly. We had a 22% increase compared to the same live events were they to be held. And that represented reaching just on 36,000 people in our decision maker target, which is what we tend to focus on, reaching about 81% of the attendees as being decision makers. We had quite noticeable expansion in terms of geographic attendance, once again, as a consequence of the pandemic. And also, interestingly, the split of our attendees was 60-40 metro regional, when ordinarily, of course, those live events would all be folks from the metropolitan areas. What was also very important to note, at least anecdotally, I can't share specific data from our clients, but our clients, in terms of their outcomes, were on the whole quite similar, if not better, largely because we were able to over-deliver in terms of attendance and registrations. We focus on 4 key channels, and as a result of that, 5 industries were represented for the calendar, including a small but important segment of the healthcare industry, but finance and banking, which is one of our biggest segments, computer software, IT, and retail consumer goods and services were the key attendees. Now, 3 and 4 of those came from companies having 100 million or more in annual revenue. And as I mentioned, more than 80% were at the director level above. Again, very much our focus and our sweet spot as an event marketing services provider. And our audience very much reflected those communities and the inventory in a sense. So there was really no change in mix of attendees as it happened as we expected it to. We did over deliver by way of representatives in each of those by volume. Our membership database, which is something that Argyle has put a great deal of effort and time into over the course of the last several years, has grown about 18% as a result of the increased additional registrations and a number of other smaller variables, but that's certainly the key one. We're now at about 750,000 members who are participating across executive networks in those industries, once again reflecting our focus on finance, IT, HR, customer experience and marketing. And they are afforded roughly 200 odd digital events annually as a result of their membership. And that membership did grow proportionately. It grew as we would expect it to in terms of our executive network members being the purchase decision makers. And it grew in terms of representative of Fortune 100s, with over 88% represented amongst that group. Excuse me. And then in terms of size of organisation, something of a familiar split to us, some small movement here or there because of the differences in some of the data, but largely an even split on businesses from 1 to 100 million in revenue, 100 to billion, and 1 to 10 billion plus, pretty much a third all the way, which is typically what we aim to focus on behalf of our clients and our members, and 40% of that being the C-suite or VP level, director level, and then 17% being managers. This is an interesting chart in the sense that you get a sense of just how significantly registrations grew. In many cases, we tripled our live goal. Our finance forum in August of last year. By the way, August is not usually a strong month for attendance. Had 1,100 registrations versus goal of 300. Likewise, our FP&A forum, nearly 1,000 registered, and so on. And while some of these, of course, don't necessarily characterize the performance of every event, there were some that were below goal. The overwhelming majority of the 155 events we conducted were in excess of goal, and these were particular outliers in terms of the degree to which they outperformed. I draw your attention to the customer experience forums at the bottom, and marketing e-commerce, which was a very interesting gathering, was double what we'd expected it to be. So, that said, that's a quick snapshot, and I will come back at the end of the presentation to share with you some thoughts about that, as well as what I'm about to share with you now. We went into the field only a couple of weeks ago, less than that, and this is the result of a sample of 100 of those. We have more, but we decided to cut off at 100 just for the sake of being able to share this with you in time. And I'm going to focus only on some of the key findings. The detailed report, I think, is better for another day with more time. And then following that, I'm hoping that you'll enjoy hearing what I have to say about how we think you should act with respect to what we've discovered in the course of last year's conversion to digital and the outlook that we're about to learn about for the rest of this year and early into the new year. The critical question for us is when do you plan to return to in-person events? And around 20% of this sample do plan holding live events by the end of the year. That is to say, pretty evenly across the third quarter and fourth quarter. And there's some that are about 15% who are delaying until 2022. But I think the third point is the most important, and that is that 30% of this sample don't plan to return to live events at all. Now, one swallow doesn't make a summer, of course, but it is my hunch, and certainly having shared this with my team and Argyle broadly, like many industry, the pandemic may well have accelerated an existing digital trend. I alluded to it earlier. Our webinar business has grown significantly as we'd expect it to, but I've not, frankly, seen a survey pre-pandemic which even indicated such a strong point of view amongst this sample, at least, compared to others, of folks who just aren't going to go back to live events. Now, of course, there are many variables in play here, and one has to be cautious. But I do think that there are a variety of reasons for which this isn't just a short-term outcome, and I see it as being a long-term one, and I'll explain what I mean by that shortly. However, when put the question, once in-person events become available, what do you anticipate the breakdown of in-person to digital events will be? And this is yet another outcome which I think reinforces the takeaway from the previous question. Now, around 10% won't do digital events, and there's a good degree of fair percentage of our industry which is very much reliant upon live events like exhibitions and trade shows, and we're not in that business. We are in the B2B category very much so, and as such very much focused around C-suite and decision makers and smaller events. But 60% favoring digital in their go-forward plans, I think, again, is just another indicator that digital events may really become the standard over live events for reasons I will explore shortly. And when asked, what do you think is most important when evaluating events for the second half of 2021, the strategic role for events hasn't, or doesn't certainly appear to have changed. Despite the platform, connecting with clients, keeping up to date are consistently the two most important criteria for our clients, and connecting with clients is really a more summary statement on behalf of specific objectives such as lead acquisition and activation. Reaching a large number is reflective of the fact that in B2B marketing, event marketing is one of the most important strategic levers available to a senior B2B marketer, and as a consequence, large numbers relative to consumer goods marketers are going to appear quite small, but I think you get the idea. And then finally, a healthy single-digit figure with respect to creating brand awareness, and again, that is, I think, reflective of the fact that our sample is of B2B clients and B2B marketers who see event marketing in that light, and certainly capable of that role. And from a budget perspective, folks in respective of 40% of this sample expect to increase their investment over this year's, and a number not far away from that, around 35%, expected to say the same, with only about 20% saying it might be lowered. We didn't, I could get into the intervals of what sort of levels of lower or levels of high there are, but for today's purposes, I just thought I would share that it's a pretty buoyant outlook from a budgetary perspective. I think this is consistent with, a lot of the current discussion in the broader sense that the economy in the United States is expected to outperform. Somewhere in the vicinity of 6% is the lowest number I've heard, 8% or more. It's been bandied about most recently as a result of the expected end of the pandemic and the return, so to speak, of doing business normally. So, it may also be that folks, and I have a strong hunch that folks have a desire to invest more in digital. I think digital has been very successful for our clients. And as a consequence, it may well be that it's provided the basis for budgetary increases purely because of the better set of numbers that have come as a result in registrations, in data collection generally. I might add, one of the benefits of it has been that we have been able to be quite we've been able to provide richer data to our clients concerning the events. And so with that said, I thought it would be good to wrap up today by sharing with you some of the things that certainly I, as a marketer, as a strategist, and as a business owner, would think about in terms of some of the takeaways and some of the things that I think merit doing. Now, first is whether or not you're in the digital camp, whether you're in the live plan, the live event camp, it doesn't really matter. I think the most important takeaway is that a hybrid strategy is highly likely. It's something that you should plan for when it comes to your event marketing strategy. And I think that there are four very important attributes that will help you distinguish between what you think is right for digital and what you think is right for live. A good deal of that has to do with the complexity of the content that you wish to share, whether that content has such characteristics that it requires a good deal more in-person presence than would be normal. Perhaps it is more educative than normal compared to other industries. Whatever that judgment might be about the content itself, but I do think that complexity favors live events, and simplicity is very important to digital events. In terms of community access, I think we have to weigh lots of considerations here and be very deliberate about, although I don't know that live necessarily is better than digital when it comes to access. Clearly, venues can hold more people in some cases, but on the other hand, digital is quite literally boundaryless. And so accessibility becomes a question of the quality of that accessibility on the one hand, as well as, the utter goal of reaching as many people as possible. And of course, for your sales teams, relationship goals are a key consideration. And that's certainly the rub for some of our clients, is the degree to which the sales force have comfortably adapted to this new world where they're not able to press the flesh, so to speak, at big events like they used to. And then finally, which is better for the brand image? What might be more on brand for you as a marketer and as a sponsor of an event, or as the purveyor of the event, so to speak? Is digital a better way of wrapping up on behalf of your brand proposition into the marketplace, or is live, for lots of reasons that have to do with the attributes of your brand, just a better experience and more consistent with your brand image goals? So some important thoughts there. The second, and I think still one many of us are coming to terms with, which is to take advantage of the scale of digital. We really have experienced much better data and bigger reach for, quite frankly, about the same effort. And, the utter convenience of attendance, such as you're experiencing now, I think has a great deal to do with driving why it is that digital events have been able to reach so many more than would normally compared to a live event. You can afford to be geographically neutral. Quite frankly, we could be as easily sharing this with the English-speaking world as we could with folks in the United States. And that's certainly something that we are planning to do going forward with certain events. It is a very lifestyle-friendly manner in which to bring people together on behalf of your business. It doesn't have the interruptions that travel present and all the other sorts of things that we ask of folks to do when they have to go to a live event. And in that sense, it's quite frictionless. I don't doubt for a moment, this is one of the underlying reasons in my view that digital events are going to be such an important and permanent feature of the marketing landscape, is that they are so easy and so frictionless. And one of the attributes worth calling out that makes it so frictionless is that it's just a less pressured experience. You as an attendee of this event are nowhere near as, I suppose, liable to the pressures of being there, having to be on, having to present yourself in the morning when perhaps there were other things that you could have been doing, and in this case you may well be double tasking. There is just a whole lot less pressure on ourselves as a consequence of attending a digital event compared to a live event. I would re-emphasize to you, it's been our learning, it's very consistent. It really hasn't changed that much from conducting live events. It's always been important, but it's more important for digital events in that content is very much the driver for success. And in particular, being prepared for any screen size is something to be mindful of. It may well be that there are many of you there sitting at home comfortably, or in the offices it may be by now, who knows, but you might be enjoying this on your regular 30-inch monitor, but there may well be, and I suspect there are many, many of you who are watching it on a 5-inch phone screen. This is something to take into account. There's not much that you can do to discriminate between one or another. And that's why I point you to the first line here, which is that visual communicates much faster and much easier. We are wired to learn visually. The largest collection of nerve endings in the brain, in the body, is the retina. There are millions. They're there for a reason. They're there to allow us to learn quickly visually. And so when you're thinking about content for your digital event and your live event, being visual is incredibly important. And something that we constantly remind folks, and I as speaker on a regular basis are very mindful of, is that for clarity and impact, it is better to be fast. It's okay to speak slowly. It's okay to speak however you're comfortable with, but we underestimate constantly the rate at which folks are able to integrate what we have to share and learn quickly. We learn much faster than we all realize, and this in turn, the pace helps support the engagement by folks in the content. Being meaningful and relevant, I don't doubt for a moment, makes tremendous sense to everybody in this meeting today and yesterday. One of the things about digital we've also learned is that we have opened up the availability of speakers from all sorts of backgrounds, and your benchmark should be that you will be able to get to better speakers because access is easier. Folks are much more willing to act in that capacity when it's digital because they have much less by way of barriers to attendance, were it to be located, even if it's in the same town. But that said too, it is very, very important that you meet what we think are much higher content expectations. which leads to the importance of being interactive. Engagement is all about involvement, both visual content being involving, smaller formats, something that we encourage for more interactivity. Chat rooms and post-event member groups are all very important ideas. Q&As that are curated to the audience. Personalization is certainly very doable in smaller groups. I thoroughly recommend that you think in terms of building an ecosystem around your digital events, that search, that social, CRM, that creating a digital marketing stack to drive outcomes for event marketing is very important to its success. And I would share with you, that's certainly our practice at Argyle. That's we combine an integrated stack to support our recruitment goals, our client sponsorship goals, and that is very meaningful. And it's meaningful before, during, and after engagement. Think in terms of multi-channel lead management, because that's in my view, the essence of good event marketing is that it is a very reliable supporter of lead management, lead generation in particular. And I would urge you also, if you haven't already, and I'm sure as digital marketers you have, but to remind you that now is the time to sharpen your segmentation. Digital, of course, is incredibly versatile, and that versatility in terms of events is more so because of it. Recruiting segments of any size, demography, location, specialization is possible. Experimentation and trial with less risk is possible. One large event or many more that are intimate and interactive it might be more preferable, as the case may be. We can certainly help you think through those questions. And just lastly, just a few watch outs. I worry a little bit about the optics of brands going live again too soon. And I think that it's always going to be on a case-by-case basis. It depends on who you are, what your brand is, what business you're in. But I would be very wary about deciding to jump into live too soon when, clearly the dynamics of the pandemic are still sorting themselves out. Clearly there has been some Zoom fatigue, but that doesn't mean it's going away. It just means that you have to get creative, that you have to be ready to improve engagement by being more creative about the content you create and so on. I would be very, very switched on to some of the new platforms, particularly in social, and shortly Apple, I expect this year, is going to release their augmented reality glasses. If Apple does it, that means it becomes a platform, because it's probably what Apple has decided to create, and that's going to have a great deal of meaning, I think, in terms of folks' interactivity with content on screens. And then the impact of AI is very important in terms of use of data and analytics and predictive modeling and lots of other things that help run a better event and recruit more people. If you have the chance to take a look at where AR's heading, you'll get a sense of what I mean. Clubhouse, if you haven't already experienced, I have one invite to share, but so I can't share with everybody. It is essentially blogging en masse, but it's very popular already, and I see a very bright future for it. Being mindful that digital natives are now managers, the folks that grew up with this stuff, that aren't strangers to it, are now in charge. And that gets me to this final point, which is, again, be visual, and especially video. Video is incredibly powerful. Folks, just to close, Darwin actually didn't say this. It's another person who did, but it is a very, very fair characterization of the meaning of his famous book. It is not the strongest that survives. It's been widely misunderstood that is the theory of evolution. That is not. It is the most adaptable, the most to the changing environment which it finds itself. I can't think of a better way to close on the effect that this has had on event marketing, to think in those terms. So thank you so much. Michael, what have we got in terms of time? Is there room for any questions?
I think that's all the time here.
Okay.
If you have any closing thoughts, I would do that briefly, but I think we just finished up our window.
Okay. Well, folks, if there were questions, I will work with Michael to take a look at them, and we will share them. I hope you've enjoyed this presentation. You can reach me at pprice@argyle.forum if you'd like to pursue a question you think that you'd love an answer to urgently, or certainly I'd be happy to address it for you. And if you want to follow some of my rants on digital marketing and some of the things that are coming down the pike, please do. Don't hesitate to follow me on Twitter at Paul N. Price. Thanks, folks. Enjoy the rest of the afternoon, and thank you so much for your time.